When our gifted son got his first C++ in chemistry, my wife's push for perfection went too far, from chaining him to a desk and injecting stimulants to planning his transfer to a Romanian boarding school, until I spotted his desperate SOS in Morse code. I still remember the knot of dread that tightened in my stomach when my wife, Kyla, utterly broke down over our brilliant son Richie's report card. He was reading at college level in 4th grade, for crying out loud, but now, his first ever C in chemistry felt like a death knell, a terrifying sign of a nightmare about to unfold. Kyla clutched that paper like it was Richie's final epitaph. "He's giving up," she whispered, her voice laced with panic. "He's throwing away everything we've worked for." I tried to play it cool, to reassure her. "Junior year, kids slack off. It happens." But Kyla, she couldn't let it go. Not for a second. At first, it seemed reasonable. New tutors, weekend study sessions, even temporarily taking away his PlayStation. Honestly, I supported that last one. Richie was gaming until 3 a.m. most nights. When his grades jumped back up to B's within a month, I genuinely thought we'd found the right balance. But for Kyla, B's were just the beginning. "We're not settling for mediocrity," she declared, buying 3 more AP prep books. She reorganized his entire study schedule, making it rigid and flexible. 6 a.m. wake-ups, school, tutoring, homework until 11 p.m. Weekends meant endless practice tests. She even quit her job, her sole focus becoming Richie's academic support. She'd sit right beside him during every single study session, correcting his posture, monitoring his focus. Other parents at school actually called her supermom. The guidance counselor praised her dedication. "More parents should be this involved," she'd say. Meanwhile, I saw Richie getting thinner. His eyes, once so bright, were always tired, haunted. But his report card? All A's now. Then came the surveillance. I installed study monitoring software, Kyla announced one night, her face glowing as she showed me her laptop. She could see everything, his screen, every single keystroke, even his eye movements through the webcam. My blood ran cold. He checked Instagram during calculus review. She hissed, pointing at the screen. 30 seconds, David. That's 30 seconds of lost potential. 30 seconds. It spiraled from there. 5 minutes, maximum, for bathroom breaks. Then, the ultimate invasion. She removed his bedroom door, eliminating any shred of privacy. Eliminates the temptation of distraction, she explained, completely deadpan. One night, around 2 a.m., I found Richie, my brilliant, resilient son, curled up on the bathroom floor, sobbing. "Dad." He choked out, his voice raw with despair. "I can't do this anymore. Your mother just wants what's best," she says. "But she counts my chews at dinner. Says digestion takes energy away from brain function." My heart shattered. I confronted Kyla, but she just pulled up her fortress of facts. College acceptance statistics, scholarship requirements, articles about wasted genius. Her laptop was a shrine to spreadsheets, tracking Richie's performance metrics down to the nanosecond. Time per problem, words per minute, comprehension percentages. "He's operating at 73% capacity," she explained, her voice chillingly clinical. "If we can get him to 90%, he'll thank us when he's at Harvard." The first time I found Richie chained to his desk, I thought I was hallucinating. A bike lock, wrapped around his ankle. Kyla stood behind him, a timer in her hand, calmly spooning protein paste into his mouth between calculus problems. "He kept getting up," she explained, as if this was the most logical solution in the world. "Wasting time. This keeps him focused. And eating while working is efficient." "Kyla." I remember my voice, barely a whisper. "This is insane." "Is it?" she shot back, her gaze unwavering. His practice scores went up 40 points. Richie just looked at me. His eyes were dead. "It's okay, Dad," he mumbled. "I need to study." Rage surged through me. I threatened to call the police, but Kyla simply showed me a notarized commitment contract Richie had signed, agreeing to necessary study support measures. "He wants this, David," she insisted. "Don't you want him to succeed?" The bike lock became locks. Plural. Both ankles. Eventually, his wrists too, with just enough slack to write. Kyla installed a catheter so he wouldn't need bathroom breaks. She blended his meals into efficient, nutritional smoothies, fed through a straw while he worked. His desk? Moved to the cold, isolated basement. "Fewer distractions," she'd said. I tried to intervene, to fight back. She changed the locks on our house, filed a restraining order claiming I was sabotaging Richie's future. The judge, seeing Kyla's carefully curated image, saw a devoted mother and a father trying to let his son waste his potential. The system failed us. I started sleeping in my car, parked outside the house, just watching, waiting. The helplessness was a physical ache. Then, last week, I saw it. An ambulance at the house. I broke down the door, my heart pounding. Richie had collapsed. Dehydration, malnutrition, exhaustion. Kyla was still there, screaming at the paramedics about his upcoming AP exams. He needs to study. You don't understand. He's going to lose everything. At the hospital, my 17-year-old son, who should have been vibrant and full of life, weighed 92 pounds. He'd been awake for 73 hours straight. Kyla, unbelievably, explained to the doctors that she'd been injecting him with some kind of stimulant she'd bought online, just to keep him alert. He consented, she shrieked, desperate. Show them your contract, baby. But Richie couldn't speak. He hadn't spoken in weeks, apparently. All he could do was trace equations on his hospital gown with his finger. Child Protective Services got involved. And somehow, impossibly, Kyla convinced them she was addressing his special needs. She showed them his perfect grades, his signed contracts, testimonials from his online tutors about his remarkable progress. They gave her a warning about the chains, suggested less restrictive study aids. And Kyla, ever so compliant, bought padded restraints. See, she told them, smiling, I'm listening. They let her take him home. I wasn't allowed within 500 feet. But I knew. I knew what she was planning. I found her browser history at an internet cafe. She was researching boarding schools in countries with flexible educational approaches, places that would understand Richie's needs. Searches like feeding tube academic performance, legal stimulants minors studying, surgically preventing sleep deprivation. Tomorrow, she was taking him for a college visit. I didn't think they were coming back. I packed my laptop and drove to the public library. The restraining order meant I couldn't go near the house, but nothing stopped me from researching. My fingers shook as I typed those school names into the search bar. Switzerland, Romania, places with names I couldn't pronounce, places that advertised intensive academic programs and 24/7 supervision. The librarian, who recognized me from the news coverage of the custody hearing, walked past my table 3 times before stopping. Her eyes softened, but she said nothing. She just placed a warm cup of coffee beside my notebook. A small gesture, but it meant the world. I found the school Kyla had bookmarked most frequently. The website showed smiling students. But something felt wrong. The testimonials were too perfect, too similar. I dug deeper, searching forums and message boards. And there it was, a chilling thread from 2019. Parents trying to get their kids back. Stories about forced studying, punishment for academic resistance, students who came back unable to function without constant instruction. My blood ran cold. This wasn't education. This was a prison. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered carefully. A whisper came through. Mr. David, this is Vicky Torres, Richie's calculus teacher. My heart raced. Teachers weren't supposed to contact me. I can't talk long, she continued. But I saw Richie yesterday when your wife brought him to collect his assignments. He couldn't hold a pencil properly. His hands were shaking, and he kept asking me what the answer was before I'd even given him the problem. Where can we meet? I pressed, desperate. I can't. But I left something in the library. 3rd floor, psychology section. Inside, child development and trauma. Page 247. The line went dead. I found the book. Inside was a folded paper. Catherine's handwriting, Vicky's real name, I realized, filled the page with meticulous observations. Dates, times, specific incidents she'd witnessed. Richie falling asleep, standing up during her class. Kyla forcing him to do push-ups in the hallway as punishment for mental laziness. The time Richie had begged Catherine for food because he'd only gotten 98% on a quiz and didn't deserve full rations. At the bottom, a searing indictment. I've reported this 3 times. Nothing happens. She has everyone convinced she's helping him. I photographed every page. Then, tucked behind the note, a USB drive. Back at my laptop, I plugged it in. Security footage from the school. Multiple clips. Richie stumbling through hallways, sitting alone at lunch, not eating, just staring at flashcards. In one video, he was in the bathroom, splashing water on his face. He looked directly at the camera, and then, his lips moved. He mouthed 2 words, help me. My chest tightened, a vice grip. Tomorrow's college visit was in less than 18 hours. I called my brother Tanner in Seattle. He picked up on the first ring. I need you to come here, I said, my voice hoarse. Now? David, what's going on? You sound, just come. Bring your medical bag. Tanner was a pediatrician, one of the few who'd believed me during the custody hearing. Even he'd been shocked when the judge sided with Kyla. I'll catch the red eye, he said. Next, I called Child Protective Services again. The caseworker sounded tired. Mr. Thompson, we've been through this. Your wife is providing educational support. The restraints have been modified per our recommendations. Richie's grades show improvement. He weighs 92 pounds, according to our last visit, and is gaining weight under the nutritional plan she submitted. Unless you have new evidence of immediate danger. I hung up, my hand shaking. They'd been to the house once since the hospital visit. Kyla had prepared for days. Hidden the worst of it. Coached Richie on what to say. Or maybe he couldn't say anything else anymore. I drove past the house, staying just outside the 500-foot limit. The basement light was on. It had been on for 3 days straight. I wondered if she ever let him sleep anymore. My phone rang. Kyla's sister, Pearl. David, I'm worried about Kyla. She called me last night talking about some school in Eastern Europe. Said American education was too soft for Richie's potential. Can you talk to her? Make her see sense. I tried visiting yesterday. She wouldn't let me in. Said I might contaminate the study environment. David, she's not well. This isn't about Richie anymore. Maybe it never was. Pearl paused, then added, the flight's tomorrow morning. If they get on that plane, I know someone at the airline. Let me see what I can do. I spent the night in my car, watching the house through binoculars. At 3 a.m., movement in the basement window. A shadow, then another. Was someone else down there with him? At 4 a.m., an unfamiliar car pulled up. A woman got out, carrying medical supplies. She went inside, stayed for an hour, then left with an envelope thick with cash. What was truly driving Kyla? Her quitting her job to monitor Richie's every second, it had always gnawed at me. What was she really trying to control? I followed the woman to a 24-hour diner, waited until she was seated, then sat down across from her. She looked up, startled. I don't know you. You were just at my house, I stated, keeping my voice low. With my son. Her face went pale. I should go, please, I pleaded. Just tell me what she hired you to do. The woman fidgeted with her coffee cup. I'm a nursing student. She found me on a tutoring site. Said she needed help with medical support for her son's education. What kind of medical support? Oral nutrients. Stimulants. Her voice dropped to a whisper. She said he had a learning disability that required intensive intervention. You saw him. I pushed, my voice trembling. Does he look like he has a learning disability? Tears welled in her eyes. He looks like he's dying. But she had paperwork, diagnosis forms, prescriptions from some online doctor. Said it was all legal. It's not. I said, my voice flat. None of this is legal. I know. She bit her lip. I knew when I saw him. That's why I diluted everything. Gave him saline instead of what she wanted. She'll figure it out soon. Will you testify? Tell CPS what you saw? She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I can't. I need this degree. I have kids of my own. But then, she pulled out her phone. I recorded some of it for my own protection. She was very specific about doses. Talked about keeping him optimally functional for the flight tomorrow. She sent me the files. Audio recordings of Kyla, chillingly calm, discussing dosages, timing, how to maintain cognitive performance during transport. In one recording, I could hear Richie in the background, reciting formulas in a monotone voice. There's something else, the nursing student added. She asked me about sedatives for the plane. Said he might be resistant to relocation and she needed him compliant but conscious for customs. My hands clenched into fists. Thank you. I managed, my voice choked. Thank you for telling me. She left quickly. I sat there, adding her recordings to my growing collection of evidence. It still might not be enough. Kyla had convinced judges, social workers, teachers. She had Richie's consent forms, his grades, his test scores. But I had less than 12 hours to stop them from leaving the country. Tanner texted. His flight had landed. He was driving straight to the library to meet me. I looked at the evidence spread across my laptop screen. Videos, audio files, teacher testimonies, medical records showing Richie's declining health despite Kyla's nutritional plans, Catherine's detailed notes, the nursing student's recordings. Somewhere in all this was the key to saving my son. I just had to find it before Kyla took him somewhere I'd never be able to reach him. The basement light in our house flickered, went out, came back on. Was that a signal? Or was I so desperate I was seeing things that weren't there? I thought about Richie in that basement, chained to his desk, fed through a straw, solving equations because that's all he could do anymore, all he was allowed to do. Tomorrow, she'd drug him, put him on a plane, take him to a place that would finish what she'd started, turn him into whatever her twisted vision of success looked like. I opened a new document, started typing everything I knew, everything I'd learned. If the authorities wouldn't listen to me, maybe they'd listen to the internet, to thousands of strangers who might see what the people who were supposed to protect Richie couldn't. But even as I typed, I knew it might not be enough. Kyla was smart, careful. She'd covered every angle, gotten every permission, created a paper trail that made her look like a devoted mother pushing her gifted son to excellence. She'd made one mistake, though. She'd let Catherine see too much. Let the nursing student get too close. Let Pearl hear the truth in her voice. And she'd underestimated how far a father would go to save his son. I looked at the time. 10 hours until their flight. 10 hours to find a way past the restraining order, past the legal system that had failed us, past Kyla's carefully constructed walls of documentation and lies. 10 hours to save Richie from disappearing into a nightmare disguised as education. Tanner pulled up beside my car. He looked at me through the window, saw something in my face that made him nod. "Tell me the plan," he said. I didn't have one. Not yet. But I had evidence. I had allies. And I had a father's determination to bring his son home. The basement light flickered again. This time I was sure. 3 short flashes, 3 long, 3 short. SS Richie was still in there, still fighting in the only way he could. I wouldn't let him down. Tanner and I sat in his rental car, reviewing the evidence. He examined Catherine's notes with medical precision, his face growing darker with each detail. I showed him the nursing student's recordings, watched his jaw clench as Kyla's voice discussed dosage calculations. He pulled out his tablet and started cross-referencing symptoms with medical databases. His fingers moved quickly across the screen, pulling up case studies and diagnostic criteria. After 20 minutes, he turned the screen toward me. Multiple windows showed research papers on educational abuse, medical neglect disguised as care, and something called achievement by proxy syndrome. We drove to a 24-hour copy center. We needed physical copies of everything. The restraining order prevented me from approaching Richie directly, but nothing stopped me from building a case. Tanner helped organize the evidence into categories: medical documentation, witness statements, video evidence, audio recordings. We created 3 identical sets. While the copies printed, Tanner made phone calls. His medical network included child psychiatrists, social workers who specialized in educational abuse, and lawyers who handled custody emergencies. Most didn't answer at this hour, but he left detailed messages, marking each call as urgent. The sun was rising when we finished. 7 hours until the flight. I checked flight tracking apps obsessively. The morning departure to Zurich showed on time. 1 stop in Frankfurt, then on to Romania. Once they left U.S. soil, my options would shrink to nothing. Tanner suggested we visit the local hospital where he had privileges. He could file a medical concern report that might carry more weight than my previous attempts. We drove there as morning traffic began building. The pediatric ward was just starting its day shift. He introduced me to Dr. Abby Hang, the department head. She listened as Tanner presented Richie's case from a medical perspective: the percentages of weight loss, sleep deprivation effects on adolescent development, the dangers of unregulated stimulant use. He showed her the video of Richie unable to stop solving equations on his hospital gown. Dr. Hang made notes, asked specific questions about timeline and symptoms. She pulled up Richie's previous hospital admission records. The official discharge summary Kyla had signed contained none of the details I remembered. It listed mild dehydration and academic stress, nothing about the stimulants or the 73-hour wait period. She agreed to file an emergency medical evaluation request with CPS. It would flag Richie's file for immediate review. She also contacted the hospital's legal department about the discrepancies in the medical records. Someone had edited them after the fact. For hours until the flight, I received a text from Pearl. Her airline contact confirmed 2 tickets booked under Kyla and Richie's names. First class to Zurich, departing at 11:15 a.m. The tickets were one-way. Tanner and I drove to the CPS office. It opened at 8 a.m., and we were waiting outside when the first employees arrived. I recognized the caseworker from previous visits. She sighed when she saw me, but allowed us inside when Tanner introduced himself and mentioned Dr. Hong's emergency filing. We presented everything in the conference room. The videos played on Tanner's laptop while the caseworker reviewed Catherine's documentation. The nursing student's recordings made her pause, replay certain sections, take notes. She called in her supervisor. The supervisor, an older woman named Margaret, watched the security footage of Richie mouthing, "Help me," 3 times before speaking. She asked about the boarding school research, the one-way tickets, the edited medical records. I showed her everything I'd found about the Romanian facility. Margaret made phone calls: the legal department, the emergency response team, the state oversight board. Each call escalated the urgency. She dispatched 2 caseworkers for an immediate welfare check despite Kyla's history of preparation for such visits. 3 hours until the flight. My phone rang. Vicky Torres calling from her classroom. She spoke quickly, nervously. Kyla had just appeared at school, demanding all of Richie's remaining assignments and textbooks. She'd brought a dolly to transport them. When Catherine asked about Richie's absence, Kyla had given vague answers about specialized tutoring, but Catherine had noticed something crucial. Kyla's car trunk was packed with suitcases. I relayed this to Margaret. She immediately called the caseworkers en route to the house, updating them about possible flight risk. She also contacted airport security, though she warned me their options were limited without a court order. Tanner suggested we drive toward the airport, staying within legal boundaries, but positioning ourselves closer. As we drove, I noticed 3 missed calls from an unknown number. The voicemail was from the nursing student. Kyla had contacted her, furious about the diluted solutions. She was demanding the student return immediately with proper supplies or face legal action for breach of contract. 2 hours until the flight. We parked in the airport cell phone lot. I could see planes taking off. Each one a constant, agonizing reminder of how close I was to losing Richie forever. Tanner fielded calls from his medical contacts. 2 child psychiatrists had agreed to provide emergency evaluations if we could get access to Richie. Tanner's turning this rescue mission into a full-blown clinical study. While Dad's building a case file bigger than those suitcases in her trunk, a lawyer specializing in emergency custody orders was drafting paperwork. Margaret called. The caseworkers had reached the house. Kyla had answered the door calmly, claimed Richie was sleeping. She'd shown them his room, where a figure lay motionless under blankets. When they'd asked to see his face, she'd said disturbing him would disrupt his essential REM cycle before his important academic opportunity. The caseworkers had insisted. The blankets concealed pillows arranged to mimic a body. Richie wasn't there. Kyla had acted shocked, claimed he must have gone for a walk. She'd even called his phone dramatically, though the caseworkers noted she didn't seem genuinely concerned. They'd searched the house with Kyla's permission. The basement study setup was gone. Desk, chair, restraints, all removed. Fresh paint covered the walls where equipment had been mounted. It smelled like bleach and primer. 1 hour until the flight. Airport security called Margaret back. They'd located Kyla's vehicle in long-term parking. Security cameras showed her entering the terminal with Richie 40 minutes ago. He'd been in a wheelchair, appearing to sleep. She'd shown documentation to airline staff about his medical condition, requiring early boarding. Margaret dispatched the emergency team to the airport. She gave me their direct number, though reminded me I couldn't approach within 500 feet. The restraining order remained in effect. Tanner and I moved to the terminal's arrival level. From there, I could watch departure doors without violating the order. My hands shook as I held binoculars, scanning faces in the crowd. Security and police vehicles began accumulating near Terminal 2. 45 minutes until departure. The emergency response team arrived. Through Tanner's phone, Margaret coordinated their movements. They had to locate Kyla and Richie in the secure boarding area without causing panic. The airline had been notified, but needed official documentation to prevent boarding. I saw uniforms moving through the terminal, watched them disappear into security checkpoints. Tanner monitored flight status obsessively. Still on time, still boarding. 30 minutes until departure. Margaret called. They'd found them. Gate 23. Richie was semi-conscious in the wheelchair, responding slowly to questions. Kyla had produced medical documents claiming he had a rare neurological condition requiring specialized treatment abroad. She'd remained calm, cooperative, showing paperwork for everything. The team needed more to intervene. The documents looked official. Richie, when asked, had mumbled agreement with his mother's plans without clear evidence of immediate danger or Richie's own objection. Their options were limited. I thought about the basement light, the SOS signal. Richie was still in there, still fighting, but Kyla had drugged him into compliance. 20 minutes until departure. Tanner grabbed his medical bag from the car. He strode toward the terminal with purpose. I followed at the legal distance, watching him disappear inside. He had privileges at multiple hospitals. He had authority I lacked. Through Margaret's updates, I learned Tanner had reached the gate. He'd identified himself as Richie's uncle and a pediatrician. He'd requested an immediate medical evaluation, citing family history and concern for Richie's welfare. Kyla had objected, but airline staff, now nervous about liability, had allowed it. 15 minutes until departure. Tanner examined Richie while emergency responders watched. He checked pupil response, reflexes, cognitive function. He asked Richie simple questions. His name? The date? Where was he going? Richie's answers came slowly, confused. He couldn't remember the day or why he was at the airport. Kyla produced more documents. Prescriptions for anti-anxiety medication, a letter from an online psychiatrist diagnosing travel phobia. She explained Richie had requested sedation for the flight. Everything had paperwork. Everything had a reasonable explanation. 10 minutes until departure. The gate agent announced final boarding. Passengers lined up, watching the drama unfold. Kyla stood, gripping the wheelchair handles. She thanked everyone for their concern, but insisted they needed to board. Richie needed treatment. Delays would harm his progress. Tanner did something I hadn't expected. He knelt beside Richie and spoke directly into his ear. Later, he told me what he'd said. Richie, if you want to stay, if you need help, just squeeze my hand. Once for yes, twice for no. The response was immediate. One squeeze. Then another. Then another. Richie's hand gripped Tanner's with surprising strength, not letting go. 5 minutes until departure. Tanner announced loudly that his patient was indicating distress. He requested immediate transport to the nearest hospital for evaluation. Kyla objected, pulled out contracts, waived consent forms. But Tanner had something more powerful, a minor patient expressing current medical need. The emergency team moved. They transferred Richie from Kyla's wheelchair to their gurney. She followed, protesting, citing parental rights. But she'd made one final, crucial error. The sedatives she'd given Richie had worn off just enough. As they wheeled him past security, he reached out, grabbed an officer's sleeve. His voice was barely audible, but the body camera caught it. Please don't let her take me. The plane left without them. At the hospital, Richie's blood work revealed a chilling cocktail of substances, modafinil, Adderall, something called phenylparacetam that wasn't even FDA approved. The doses were carefully calculated to keep him functional but compliant. Tanner had the lab run comprehensive panels, documenting everything. Margaret arrived with a court order for emergency protective custody. The judge who'd issued my restraining order had been recalled from weekend plans when presented with the new evidence. He'd reviewed the videos, the medical reports, Catherine's documentation. The order was temporary, but immediate. Kyla was escorted to a separate room for questioning. I watched through the hospital window as she argued with officials, still insisting everything she'd done was for Richie's benefit. She had binders of documentation, years of planning, all focused on maximizing his academic potential. In her mind, she was saving him from mediocrity. The restraining order was modified. I was allowed supervised visits while the investigation continued. The first time I entered Richie's room, he was sleeping. Real sleep, not drugged unconsciousness. Tanner had insisted on no visitors for the first 12 hours, letting his body begin to recover. When Richie woke, he looked at me with eyes that seemed ancient. The first thing he said wasn't about the chains, or the substances, or the missed meals. He asked if he'd failed his AP exams. The conditioning ran deep. Recovery would take time. The social workers explained that Richie would need therapy to process what he'd endured. He'd need to relearn that rest wasn't wasteful, that eating wasn't just fuel for studying, that his worth wasn't measured in test scores. The path ahead was long, but he was here. Not in Romania. Not in some facility that would have continued what Kyla started. He was in a hospital bed, eating solid food, sleeping without restraints. It was a beginning. Catherine visited on the second day, bringing cards from classmates who'd only just learned what Richie had endured. She cried when she saw him, apologized for not doing more sooner. But her documentation had been crucial. Her courage in leaving that note had started the chain of events that led to this moment. The nursing student came forward officially, providing full testimony about what she'd witnessed. Her recordings became key evidence. She'd risked her career to do the right thing, diluting those solutions, buying Richie time his body desperately needed. Pearl worked with authorities to piece together Kyla's descent into obsession. She found journals dating back years, documenting every test score, every assignment, every minute of Richie's scheduled time. What had started as maternal concern had twisted into something unrecognizable. The Romanian school was investigated. Interpol got involved when similar facilities were discovered across Eastern Europe. Parents who'd lost children to these programs came forward. Richie had narrowly avoided joining their ranks. Tanner extended his stay, using his medical leave to help coordinate Richie's treatment. He assembled a team of specialists who understood the unique nature of educational abuse. They developed a recovery plan that addressed both physical and psychological damage. The basement was excavated as evidence. Investigators found more than just study equipment. There were cameras I hadn't known about, recording devices, years of footage showing the progressive escalation. Kyla had documented everything, believing it would someday serve as proof of her revolutionary educational methods. Child Protective Services underwent review. The caseworkers who dismissed earlier concerns faced scrutiny. Policies changed. Training expanded to recognize achievement-focused abuse. Richie's case became a cautionary tale in their workshops. I moved back home once the restraining order was lifted. The house felt different. Richie's room had a door again. The basement became storage space. We ate meals together at regular times. No calculations about optimal digestion. Small victories, but challenges remained. Richie would sometimes panic if he wasn't studying. He'd wake up reciting formulas, reaching for textbooks that weren't there. The deprogramming process was slow, requiring patience I was still learning to provide. School became complicated. Richie was academically advanced, but socially stunted. He'd missed normal teenage experiences while chained to his desk. The guidance counselor who'd once praised Kyla now worked to create a modified schedule that balanced education with healing. Some nights I'd find Richie at his desk out of habit, not studying, just sitting. He'd look at me with confusion, unsure what to do with free time. We'd work on it together, learning to play board games, watch movies, have conversations about nothing important. The legal proceedings continued. Kyla's lawyer argued for mental health treatment rather than imprisonment. The prosecution presented evidence of calculated abuse. The judge would ultimately decide, but Richie's testimony would be crucial when he was ready to provide it. I thought about the father I'd been before this started, the one who'd supported reasonable study schedules and temporary PlayStation removal. I'd enabled the early stages, mistaking control for care. That guilt would stay with me, a reminder of how gradually boundaries can erode. But we were healing, both of us. Tanner returned to Seattle, but called weekly, monitoring Richie's progress. Catherine continued teaching, now with heightened awareness of warning signs. The nursing student graduated, her conscience clear. Richie started therapy with a specialist in coercive control. Together, they worked through the layers of conditioning. He learned to recognize his own wants separate from imposed expectations. Progress was measured in small rebellions. Choosing to read fiction, taking walks without purpose, saying no to extra credit assignments. The flight to Zurich left without its intended passengers. The Romanian facility closed after investigation. Kyla remained in psychiatric evaluation, and Richie slowly but steadily began to reclaim his life. Each day without chains was a victory. Each meal eaten at a table was progress. Each night of unmonitored sleep was freedom. We had work ahead of us. Years of healing couldn't happen overnight. But Richie was 17, not 40. He had time to build a life defined by his own choices. And I had time to be the father I should have been from the start. One who protected instead of enabled, who listened instead of assumed. The psychiatric evaluation facility wouldn't allow me direct contact with Kyla for the first week. I spent those days with Richie, watching him slowly emerge from years of conditioning. He'd sit in the hospital bed, hands twitching as if holding a pencil, eyes darting to where a textbook should be. Tanner arranged for Dr. Nomi Vasquez, a specialist in educational trauma, to begin working with Richie. Their first session lasted only 20 minutes before Richie started hyperventilating, convinced he was wasting study time. Dr. Vasquez simply sat with him, demonstrating breathing exercises until his panic subsided. The hospital nutritionist developed a careful refeeding plan. Richie's digestive system had adapted to liquid nutrients and minimal solid food. Each meal became a small battle. He'd count chews automatically, then catch himself and look confused. The nurses learned to distract him with conversation about anything except academics. Vicky Torres visited again, bringing Richie's favorite novel from before everything started. He held it like a foreign object, turning it over in his hands. When he tried to read, his eyes skimmed for testable information rather than enjoyment. Catherine left it on his bedside table without pushing. Margaret from CPS coordinated with the district attorney's office. The evidence we'd compiled painted a clear picture of escalating abuse disguised as education. The modified medical records alone constituted fraud. Combined with the restraints, forced stimulants, and documented physical deterioration, criminal charges seemed inevitable. I met with a court-appointed guardian ad litem assigned to represent Richie's interests. She reviewed everything. The videos, Catherine's documentation, the nursing student's testimony. Her job was to recommend what would best serve Richie's recovery, regardless of what Kyla or I wanted. The Romanian school investigation expanded. Authorities discovered a network of facilities across Eastern Europe targeting parents of gifted children. They promised to maximize potential through intensive methods. The one Kyla had chosen advertised a 100% university placement rate. They didn't mention the students who never recovered enough to attend. Richie's first attempt at walking outside the hospital was difficult. He'd been confined to a desk for so long that open spaces felt overwhelming. We made it halfway around the building before he asked to go back. Progress, not perfection, Dr. Vasquez reminded us. The guardian ad litem interviewed Richie over several sessions. He struggled to articulate his experience, often defaulting to academic language when emotional expression felt too difficult. She noted how he apologized repeatedly for underperforming during their conversations. Kyla's evaluation revealed what the psychiatrist called achievement-oriented delusional disorder. She genuinely believed she'd been saving Richie from mediocrity. In her mind, every restriction, every stimulant, every hour chained to his desk was an act of love. The doctor said treatment would take years, if it worked at all. I found Richie's old PlayStation in the garage and brought it to his hospital room. He stared at it like an artifact from another life. When I suggested we play something together, he asked if it would help his hand-eye coordination for standardized tests. We put it away for another day. The nursing student testified before a grand jury. Her recordings proved crucial in establishing Kyla's intent to circumvent medical safety. She described Richie's condition when she'd seen him. The tremors, the vacant stare, the way he'd mechanically recited formulas even while she'd inserted the 4. Tanner had to return to Seattle, but arranged for his colleague, Dr. James Park, to continue Richie's medical care. Dr. Park specialized in adolescent recovery from prolonged stress. He started with basic things, teaching Richie to recognize hunger cues, to distinguish between physical exhaustion and laziness. The grand jury indicted Kyla on multiple charges: child endangerment, medical fraud, false imprisonment. Her lawyer argued for release to a treatment facility, but the judge considered her a flight risk given the Romania plans. She remained in psychiatric hold pending trial. Richie's first night in his own bed at home was hard. He kept getting up, looking for his desk. I found him in the basement at 3 a.m., sitting on the floor where his study station had been. We sat together in silence until he was ready to go back upstairs. The school developed an individualized education plan for Richie's return. Part-time at first, with breaks as needed. No AP classes for now. The guidance counselor who'd once praised Kyla's dedication worked to undo the damage, creating a schedule that prioritized healing over achievement. Dr. Vasquez introduced art therapy. Richie initially approached it like an assignment, asking about grading criteria. Slowly, he began to draw without purpose. Abstract shapes, dark scribbles, eventually recognizable images. One day, he drew himself without chains. We framed it. The district attorney offered Kyla a plea deal. Guilty pleas to lesser charges in exchange for mandatory psychiatric treatment and supervised visitation rights after Richie turned 18, if he chose. Her lawyer advised accepting. Kyla refused, insisting she'd done nothing wrong. Richie's first day back at school lasted 2 hours. He sat in the back of his English class, hands shaking whenever someone answered a question. Catherine had prepared his classmates, asking them to give him space. Still, the whispers followed him through the halls. I hired a tutor, but not for academics. She specialized in teaching life skills to trauma survivors. They worked on basic things: how to rest without guilt, how to eat without calculating optimal digestion, how to have conversations without competitive elements. Richie called her his unlearning teacher. The basement became Richie's choice. He wanted to reclaim the space. We painted it together, bright colors covering the spots where restraints had been mounted. He chose the furniture: a comfortable couch, a TV, a gaming setup. No desk. When he needed to study, he used the kitchen table. Pearl visited regularly, bringing normal aunt things: cookies, gossip about extended family, complaints about traffic. She never mentioned Kyla, unless Richie brought her up. Those conversations were rare and brief. He wasn't ready to process that relationship yet. The trial date was set for 6 months out. Richie would have to testify if Kyla maintained her not guilty plea. Dr. Vasquez worked with him on preparation, teaching him grounding techniques for when memories overwhelmed him. He practiced saying, "I don't know," when he didn't have perfect answers. Some days were harder than others. Richie would have panic attacks triggered by academic situations: a pop quiz, a teacher praising another student's work, even seeing someone else studying intensely. The school nurse became familiar with his breathing exercises, keeping a quiet space available when he needed it. I returned to work, but arranged flexible hours. Being present for Richie's recovery mattered more than any deadline. My boss, who'd followed the situation, understood. Not everyone did. Some parents still whispered about how Kyla had just wanted the best for her son. Richie made a friend. Marcus sat next to him in art class, never asking about the past, only talking about video games and movies. Their friendship grew slowly, built on shared interests that had nothing to do with achievement. The first time Richie laughed, really laughed, was at something Marcus said about a terrible movie sequel. Physical therapy helped with the muscle atrophy from months of confinement. Richie's body had to relearn basic movements. The therapist treated him like any other teen recovering from injury, which he appreciated. No special treatment, no pity, just exercises to rebuild strength. We established new routines. Dinner at 6 o'clock, no exceptions. Board game nights on Fridays. Walks on Sundays, going a little farther each time. Structure without rigidity. Predictability without control. Richie needed to know what to expect while learning he had choices within that framework. The pre-trial hearings revealed more evidence. Investigators found Kyla had been in contact with the Romanian facility for over a year, planning Richie's eventual enrollment. She'd sent them videos of him studying, proud progress reports of his optimization. The facility had praised her methods, encouraged escalation. Dr. Park monitored Richie's physical recovery closely. His weight gradually increased. The tremors stopped. Blood work showed his system clearing the last traces of stimulants. Each improvement was documented, evidence of what his body had endured and overcome. Richie decided he wanted to see Kyla before the trial. Dr. Vasquez supported the decision. With careful preparation, the meeting would be supervised in a controlled environment with clear boundaries. Richie could leave at any time. He needed to face her to move forward. The meeting lasted 12 minutes. Kyla spent it explaining how ungrateful Richie was, how she'd sacrificed everything for his future, how he was throwing away his potential. Richie listened, then stood up and left without saying a word. In the car afterward, he cried for the mother he'd never really had. Spring came slowly. Richie's grades were average, and he was proud of them. B's and C's earned without chains, without stimulants, without fear. He joined the gaming club, discovering he could enjoy competition without it consuming him. Small victories that felt enormous. The plea negotiations continued. Kyla's lawyer, seeing the mounting evidence, pushed harder for a deal. The district attorney held firm. Guilty plea to all charges, mandatory treatment, no contact until Richie was an adult, and only then if he initiated. Kyla finally began to waver. I found a therapist for myself. The guilt over enabling the early stages, the trauma of watching my son deteriorate, the stress of fighting systems that should have protected him. It all needed processing. Healing wasn't just for Richie. The whole family had been damaged by Kyla's obsession. 2 weeks before trial, Kyla accepted the plea deal. 5 years supervised probation, mandatory psychiatric treatment, no contact with Richie until he turned 18. If he wanted to see her, then it would be his choice. With therapeutic support, the judge accepted the agreement. Richie received the news quietly, relief mixed with grief for the mother he'd wished for, but never had. Dr. Vasquez helped him process the complex emotions. There was no celebration, just a quiet acknowledgement that one chapter was closing. We sold the house. Too many memories haunted those rooms. Richie helped choose our new place, smaller, brighter, with no basement. His room had windows on 2 walls and space for all the things he was rediscovering. Books for pleasure, art supplies, a gaming setup, normal teenage chaos. The summer before senior year, Richie got a part-time job at a bookstore. No academic pressure, just recommending stories to customers and organizing shelves. His manager knew his history, but treated him like any other employee. The normalcy was therapeutic. Vicky Torres retired early, partly due to guilt over not acting sooner. At her farewell party, she hugged Richie and apologized again. He told her she'd saved his life by leaving that note. Without her courage, he might be in Romania now, lost to Kyla's vision forever. Senior year began differently. Richie took regular classes, not AP. He joined drama club, discovering he enjoyed performing. His college applications focused on what interested him, not what looked impressive. Some were reaches, some were safeties. All were his choice. The acceptance letters came in spring. Richie had options. State schools, small liberal arts colleges, even a few more competitive ones. He chose a small school 3 hours away, far enough for independence, but close enough to come home when needed. The decision was his alone. Graduation day arrived. Richie walked across the stage to receive his diploma. No longer the valedictorian Kyla had tried to force him to become. In the audience, I cheered for the young man who'd survived, who'd chosen his own path, who'd learned that achievement meant more than grades. That night, Richie thanked me, not for saving him, but for seeing him. For recognizing that the chains weren't love, that excellence without choice wasn't success. We played video games until midnight, celebrating nothing more than being together, healthy, and free. The future stretched ahead, uncertain, but his own.